in a row, as the Blazers refer to it.
Westbrook outside trying to counter with a three, and that's the second air ball he has thrown tonight.
Depending on who you ask, Russell Westbrook might be the most polarizing NBA legend of all time. At the peak of his prime, he was legendary, recording an insane volume of stats unseen in 50 years. He broke Oscar Robertson's record for most triple-doubles in a single season. But despite his success, his flaws were also very apparent. And because of this, he always had some critics. However, as he aged and his athleticism was no longer there, Westbrook has experienced an agonizing final phase of his NBA career. To the point where it's rare to find someone who still enjoys watching him play. It seemed like it happened so quickly too. His entire reputation collapsed with the blink of an eye. In this video, let's dissect how and when these four NBA legends became despised towards the end of their careers. What changed and what caused their reputation to go downhill so quickly?
You're always making these spectacular moves. Do you anticipate doing them, or is it just a second nature to you? Like, do you just not even have to think about it?
The way you explain it, you need to be around more often.
Before we start, I want to introduce you to a brand new sponsor for this video, Arena Club. Are you a fan of trading cards? Think about how tiresome the process is when you buy packs, then open the packs, pull some cards, and then send them off for grading. It'll probably take you weeks to finally get them back, and only then can you sell them to get your money. Well, Arena Club has revolutionized this entire process, all on their digital platform. When you purchase a slab pack, you get authentic, graded cards instantly, and you have the option to hold it, sell it instantly, auction it, or have it shipped directly to you to get the physical copy in your hands. Arena Club offers a wide range of packs starting at $25, and here I just opened the $250 Ruby pack and got a mint condition 2019 Panini Mosaic RJ Barrett. What makes them stand out is their full transparency, showing every card in the pack that you can pull. On your account, you also have a digital showroom where you can trade, sell, auction off your cards, or of course, have Arena Club ship them out to you. They are the safest, most trusted in the game, and they have special drops at least twice a week, so stay on the lookout for that. Right now, you can get 20% off your first slab pack or card purchase by going to arenaclub.com/hoops and use my code HOOPS at checkout. Thank you to Arena Club for sponsoring this video. If you can pinpoint the exact moment in which the perception of Westbrook drastically flipped, it has to be on November 6th, 2021. But before we get into that, let's rewind a bit. In the summer of 2021, the Lakers made a blockbuster deal to acquire Russell Westbrook from the Wizards. At the time this trade happened, some folks were concerned about Westbrook's questionable fit on the roster, but it wasn't necessarily seen as a bad trade right off the bat. Everybody they gave up was a role player. Two of them, KCP and Kyle Kuzma, played a significant role in helping the Lakers win a championship the year prior. However, with LeBron having a large influence within the organization, he reportedly made a massive push for the front office to acquire Westbrook by any means possible. This was a decision they would soon regret. In fact, shortly after Westbrook's departure, Dave McMenamin of ESPN said, quote, "Sources told ESPN that every member of the organization involved in the Russell Westbrook trade, including James, admit they misjudged it, owning part of the blame." So this brings us to November 6th, 2021. In just his 10th game with the Lakers, Westbrook had one of his worst games ever. 1 for 13 from the field, 6 turnovers. It was this one game that made Lakers fans realize, this isn't gonna work, is it? While Westbrook averaged a triple-double the year before on the Wizards, he was now put in a role where the offense was not constructed around him. LeBron and Anthony Davis were the two best players on the team, and Westbrook, as a mere third option, had a hard time impacting the game. This game in particular turned the Lakers fan base against him. It made everyone realize that even when playing with two of the best players in the league, Westbrook is still not able to adapt. It seemed like in every close game, when Westbrook had the ball in the fourth quarter, he would do something absurdly bad.
Taken by Russ, down goes LeBron. Russ loses control of it. Not a great sequence.
Above all else, it was his contract that was the catalyst for this hatred. He was making $44 million, the highest paid player on the team. Now, Westbrook isn't a guy who lets things get to his head, but it reached a breaking point. Because he found out other kids in school were calling his kids Westbrook as well. It was getting so bad that his family was getting affected. On the court, his bad shot selection, his out-of-control passes, and all of his layups at the rim, even the most simplest of shots, he struggled with, because everything he did, he relied on athleticism. Normally, when a player's athleticism dwindles away, the only thing they can fall back on is fundamentals and IQ, both of which Westbrook never had. For example, moving off the ball is a quality that most point guards do not practice, since they really don't do it much. But for Westbrook, this is something he's always tried to avoid. Most importantly, however, Westbrook was unwilling to sacrifice for the greater good. Several times he expressed frustration when getting benched, and voiced his displeasure towards the coaching staff for inconsistent playing time. To be fair, a lot of the fault does go to the Lakers. They admitted that Westbrook was not a good fit for this team. A few years later, he did have, a slight redemption arc in Denver. Westbrook was able to recapture his former glory coming off the bench, but the damage was done. In just 1.5 seasons on the Lakers, his reputation went down the gutter. He immediately turned into a minimum contract player, and it's so hard for him to even get signed to an NBA team. Unless he can prove to be a positive contributor to help a team win the championship, Westbrook's image will never recover. It's a shame for one of the most iconic players in NBA history, a player who made everyone numb to the term triple-double. Carmelo Anthony. While Melo is a completely different player to Westbrook, both of them have experienced a very similar career arc. When Melo started creeping up in age, it was a much slower decline. You could say in the summer of 2017, when he got traded from New York to Oklahoma City, the hope was both him and Paul George would team up with MVP Westbrook, and this formidable trio would compete for the championship. Nobody knew it at the time, but this trade initiated the downfall of Melo's career. He was never the third option on any previous team he'd been on, so being forced to take a step back was, let's just say, he didn't like it.
How do you feel about starting at the 4, or the concept of starting at the 4, or even coming off of the bench? And the second question is...
Who, me?
Oh. I guess that answers that part.
Hey, P, they said I got to come off the bench.
Now, if you've been following Melo for his entire career like I have, we all know he has a bit of an ego. When Jeremy Lin was popping off in New York, Melo was envious of his success. Even his former teammate Amari Stoudemire admitted not everyone was a fan of Lin's success. However, that was all quickly forgotten when Melo led the Knicks to their best season since the Patrick Ewing era. Yet, that turned out to be just a one-season wonder, as the Knicks missed the playoffs for the next 4 seasons. So upon his arrival to OKC, Melo's reputation as a losing player was stronger than it's ever been before. And joining a team like this, it was time to change that.
Role at center after DeMarcus Cousins was traded to New Orleans last year.
Or was it? Much like Westbrook's first few games in Los Angeles, you could immediately recognize that Melo was never gonna fit in OKC. Not because of his skill set, but because of his attitude and ego. For most of his possessions, he wanted to call his own number, face up, ISO, jab step, jab step, jab step. He was trying to do the same thing he was doing in New York. The Knicks were okay with it back then because they didn't have any better options. But as Melo got older, his ISO moves became less and less effective. Yet he believed he can still be that guy. This created an uncomfortable situation in OKC, with Melo believing he deserves a bigger role. Instead, he was relegated to being primarily a spot-up shooter, kinda like Kevin Love in Cleveland or Chris Bosh in Miami. The thing is, unlike those two guys, Melo is not good at any other part of the game besides scoring. He can't pass, he can't defend, and he lacks effort. At times, he'd stand in the corner for long periods of time waiting for a pass. That was probably the best role he could have been in. Westbrook and George are both better playmakers than Melo, and we've seen this scenario when 3 stars get together. One guy has to sacrifice more than the other two. Of course, Melo wasn't the only one at fault here, but he shouldered the blame for performing way under his expectations, which culminated in a first-round playoff loss to the young Utah Jazz, where Melo had the worst series he's ever had before. This series was an overview of what Melo looks like as a third option who's missing all his shots, a guy who provides literally nothing else to the game. The Carmelo Anthony experiment in OKC lasted only 1 season, and this lone season essentially marked the slow decline of his career. It was here when everyone realized Melo is not a star anymore. In reality, this was a microcosm of his entire career. It's not just OKC where he was a black hole. Everywhere he's played before, that was the same. That's why he only made it past the second round one time. In hindsight, despite his popularity, perhaps Melo was never as good as we thought. Ray Allen. For much of Ray Allen's career, he was one of the quietest stars of his generation. Drafted around the same time as guys like Kobe, Allen Iverson, Tim Duncan, Kevin Garnett, Dirk, Vince Carter, T-Mac, Paul Pierce, it always seemed like Allen was always a few steps below them in terms of popularity. Because of this, and being a generally nice guy off the court, Allen was a well-respected star. You'd rarely ever see him in negative headlines. His teammates loved him. However, it wasn't until he joined the Boston Celtics and later the Miami Heat when the national media started paying more attention to him. On the surface, these guys seemed like an unbreakable core. Looking back on his time in Boston, Ray had a brewing feud with Rondo, and it caused him to drift apart from his other teammates, and ultimately his exit from Boston. Pierce and KG described Ray as being cold. He rarely ever hung out with them outside of basketball. He was just, more introverted than they were. However, Ray felt disrespected by the organization when, during a team meeting, Doc Rivers told him Avery Bradley would be taking his starting spot at shooting guard. This seriously upset Ray, to the point of no reconciliation. After the 2012 playoffs, Ray joined the Miami Heat, their arch rival.
For Miami, number 34, Ray Allen replaces Mario Chalmers.
Now, I don't blame Ray. Heck, even most Celtics fans don't blame him for feeling disrespected. But joining the Miami Heat, of all teams, right after losing Game 7 to them, and throwing a shot at Boston on the way out, that's gotta hurt. This wasn't a normal offseason signing. To the Celtics, this was a betrayal. Remember when Kevin Durant joined the Warriors? The animosity towards him became unfathomable. Not only did he join his rival, but he made the Warriors unstoppable. It impacted the rest of the league because nobody else was gonna win anything. Obviously, Ray joining the Heat does not hold a candle to the impact of Durant, but it was one of the reasons why the Celtics lost their status as contenders. LeBron and the Heat were the most hated team in basketball at the time, so Allen added fuel to that fire with his betrayal. The Celtics were the toughest team in the East who had a real shot at beating them, but not anymore.
Rebound box. Back out to Allen. His three-pointer. Bang!
Nearing the end of his NBA life, Ray hit the most memorable shot of this entire Heat era. The funny thing is, when folks look back at this shot, they rarely see it as part of Ray Allen's legacy. They see it as the shot that saved LeBron's career. Scottie Pippen. Pippen spent all of his best years as the second fiddle to Jordan, except for maybe like 1 or 2 seasons when he briefly retired to play baseball. Basically, when you're the Robin to MJ's Batman for your entire career, it's almost guaranteed you'd want to prove to the world you can be more than that. And if that wasn't enough, Pippen was getting severely underpaid too. He signed a 7-year deal in 1991 for only $18 million. Through the 90s, NBA salaries skyrocketed, with multiple players inking $100+ million deals for the first time ever. But Pippen, being locked into a 7-year deal, was angry and frustrated that the Bulls would not renegotiate. He was very antsy about the whole contract situation in his last year in Chicago, to the point where he threatened to not play. This was the beginning of everyone starting to shift their perspective on him. Yeah, he was the 6th highest paid player on his own team, but his actions directly impacted the chemistry. He created such an unbearable environment at practice and during games, where he seemed to stop caring and stop showing up. Anyway, after Jordan retired, Pippen sought greener pastures elsewhere. This brings us to the 1998-99 season. He joined the Houston Rockets to create supposedly a new super team with Charles Barkley and Hakeem Olajuwon, but it was more like he walked into a retirement home. The Rockets faced problems all year long, some of it due to Charles Barkley being out of shape, but mostly due to Scottie's bad attitude and just lack of dedication to build something in Houston. I think as Scottie approached his twilight years, the only thing he cared about was making back the money he felt he was robbed of. Heck, even in Portland, they won a lot of games. but Pippen was so disinterested. Not to mention, he received some flack from the fans. As the leader and former 6-time champion, he didn't do enough to guide the young Blazers on the right track. You know how they were called the Jail Blazers back then? Because they kept getting in trouble off the court? Well, that could have been prevented had Pippen stepped up and guided them to a better path. He simply just did not care, as he faded away into retirement. Anyway, that's all folks. Those were some NBA legends who were very celebrated during their heyday. But by the end of their careers, they were quite hated. The public perception turned on them. And even now, when we think of them, their reputation is kind of in the gutter. Thank you all so much for watching. I hope y'all enjoyed the video. And of course, as always, I'll see you next time. Peace.